I never thought I'd be the guy posting here. For years, I read stories on this subreddit and always assumed there had to be signs people ignored. I used to think, if my wife ever cheated on me, I'd know immediately. Turns out I was completely wrong. My wife, 34F, and I, 36M, had been married for 8 years. Together for almost 11. We weren't some perfect couple from a movie, but we had built a life together. We owned a house, had a dog, shared friends, and talked about having kids someday. At least, that's what I thought. Looking back now, I can see the cracks were there long before everything exploded. The first thing that changed was her attitude. She became unusually short-tempered. Every conversation felt like I was stepping into a minefield. If I asked how her day went, she'd snap at me. If I forgot something small, she'd act like I had committed a crime. At first, I blamed stress. She worked in marketing and constantly complained about deadlines, clients, and office politics. I tried to be supportive. I cooked more often. I handled extra chores around the house. I gave her space when she asked for it. Nothing helped. In fact, the more understanding I was, the colder she became. Then the lies started. Small lies at first. She'd tell me she was working late, but when I asked about her project later, she'd get details wrong. She'd say she was having dinner with a coworker, then mention a completely different restaurant than the one she'd supposedly visited. Whenever I pointed out inconsistencies, she'd immediately get defensive. Why are you interrogating me? Do you have trust issues or something? You're being paranoid. After hearing those responses enough times, I started questioning myself. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe marriage just goes through rough periods. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Then came the phone. Before, she'd leave it lying around the house without a second thought. Suddenly, it never left her hand. Bathroom? Phone came with her. Taking out the trash. Phone came with her. Shower. Phone sat on the counter within arm's reach. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and noticed she wasn't in bed. I found her downstairs sitting in the dark living room. She was smiling at her phone. Not just smiling. The kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. When she noticed me standing there, she nearly dropped the device. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Nothing." The answer came way too fast. "Who are you talking to?" "No one." I remember staring at her. "No one." At 2 in the morning. While actively texting. The explanation made absolutely no sense. When I pointed that out, she rolled her eyes. "God, you're exhausting." Then she walked upstairs and locked herself in the bedroom. That moment stuck with me. Not because I had proof of anything. But because it felt like I was watching a stranger wearing my wife's face. The next few weeks got even weirder. She started spending more money without explanation. New clothes appeared. New perfume. New hairstyles. Gym memberships. Beauty appointments. Things she had never cared much about before suddenly became priorities. And before anyone says she was simply working on herself, I would have believed that if she hadn't become increasingly distant from me at exactly the same time. The final thing that really set off alarms happened during a friend's birthday party. We were standing with a group of people when someone's phone buzzed. My wife's phone buzzed at the exact same moment. I watched her face change instantly. A smile. A nervous glance. Then she excused herself and practically ran outside. I don't know why, but I followed. Not immediately. Maybe 30 seconds later. When I stepped outside, I caught the last few seconds of her conversation. She was laughing. Softly. Flirting. I couldn't hear everything. But I heard enough. And then I heard a sentence that would keep me awake for weeks afterward. "I miss you too." The second she saw me standing there, her face went completely white. The call ended instantly. Neither of us said anything. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. And for the first time in our entire relationship, I genuinely wondered if my wife was cheating on me. I wish I could say I confronted her right there outside the party. I didn't. Partly because I was shocked. Partly because I was scared of what she might say. And partly because I still wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation. Maybe I misheard. Maybe she was talking to a female friend. Maybe there was context I didn't know. When we got home that night, I brought it up. As calmly as I could. "Who were you talking to outside?" Her reaction was immediate. "What? The phone call." "What phone call?" That answer hit me harder than I expected. Not because she denied cheating. Because she denied something that had happened less than 2 hours earlier. I literally watched her take the call. "You know what I'm talking about." She sighed dramatically and tossed her purse onto the kitchen counter. It was Amanda. Amanda who? My coworker. The problem? I knew Amanda. We had gone to dinner with her and her husband multiple times. Amanda wasn't the type of person my wife would secretly sneak outside to talk to at a party. And Amanda definitely wasn't someone she'd say, "I miss you too," to in that tone. Still, I let it go. At least outwardly. Internally, something had changed. For the first time in our marriage, I stopped automatically believing her. The next morning, I woke up early. My wife was still asleep. Her phone sat charging on her nightstand. I stared at it. I knew checking it would cross a line. But I also knew she was lying. I could feel it. Unfortunately, her phone was locked. I knew her old passcode. Not the new one. 3 failed attempts later, I stopped. I didn't want her waking up to security alerts. The entire day I couldn't focus on work. Every conversation replayed in my head. Every excuse. Every inconsistency. Every late night. Every argument she'd started for seemingly no reason. By the time I got home, I had convinced myself I was either about to discover something terrible or completely lose my mind. Then something happened that made the decision for me. Around 8 p.m., she got a text. I saw it appear on her lock screen while she was in the shower. Just a preview. Only a few words. But those few words changed everything. Last night was worth. That was all I could see before the notification disappeared. Last night was worth what? Worth staying out late. Worth lying to me. Worth what exactly? My stomach dropped. When she came back into the room, she noticed my expression immediately. What? Who texted you? No one. Again. No one. Apparently nobody had become the most active person in her life. I told her what I'd seen. For a split second, panic flashed across her face. Then it vanished. That's from Jessica. Another lie. I knew Jessica too. Jessica was married with 3 kids and barely knew how to send text messages. When I pointed that out, my wife exploded. Not nervous. Not guilty. Angry. The kind of anger designed to make someone stop asking questions. She accused me of spying. Of invading her privacy. Of becoming controlling. The argument lasted almost an hour. And somehow, by the end of it, I was the one apologizing. I remember sitting alone afterward wondering how the hell that happened. I started the conversation asking about a suspicious text. I ended the conversation apologizing for making her uncomfortable. It felt like my brain was being rewired. A few days later, another strange thing happened. I came home early from work. Completely unplanned. A meeting got cancelled. I figured I'd surprise her with lunch. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a car parked down the street. Nothing unusual about that. Except when I walked into the house, my wife looked genuinely terrified to see me. Not surprised. Terrified. She dropped a coffee mug. It shattered across the kitchen floor. "Why are you home?" The question came out before she even said hello. "I live here." "I thought you were working." The room felt wrong. "I can't explain it. You know how sometimes you walk into a place and immediately sense something is off? That feeling." Her hair was messy. Her breathing was uneven. And there were 2 wine glasses in the sink. At noon. On a Wednesday. I had a friend over. The explanation arrived before I even asked. Interesting. Because there was only one dirty coffee mug on the counter. No food. No extra jacket. No purse. Nothing that suggested a friend had been there. Just 2 wine glasses. She cleaned them almost immediately while talking. Like she suddenly remembered they existed. The entire situation felt staged. That night I barely slept. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to accuse her anymore. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to keep accepting obvious lies. I needed facts. Real facts. Because every time I confronted her without proof, she twisted reality until I questioned my own memory. So I started paying attention. Really paying attention. I began writing things down. Dates. Times. Excuses. Work events. Late nights. Everything. And less than a week later, I accidentally discovered something that completely destroyed the last bit of trust one still had left. Something hidden in our own house. Something my wife clearly never expected me to find. The thing about lies is that one lie usually creates 5 more. And eventually, people get sloppy. 3 days after I started documenting everything, I was looking for a screwdriver in the garage. Nothing dramatic. Just a normal Saturday afternoon. Our garage was a disaster. Boxes everywhere. Old furniture. Random junk we kept promising to organize someday. While digging through one of the storage shelves, I found a small paper shopping bag tucked behind a stack of paint cans. At first I thought it was mine. Then I looked inside. My stomach immediately tightened. There was a men's watch. An expensive one. Definitely not mine. I stood there staring at it for what felt like 5 minutes. Maybe it belonged to a friend. Maybe it was a gift. Maybe there was some explanation. Then I found the note. It wasn't a love letter. Nothing that obvious. Just a small receipt folded in half. On the back, written in my wife's handwriting. "Can't wait to see you again, Red Heart." I felt physically sick. Not angry. Not yet. Just sick. Like someone had punched straight through my chest. I took pictures. Put everything back exactly where I'd found it. And said nothing. That evening, my wife acted completely normal. She sat next to me on the couch. Asked what movie I wanted to watch. Ordered takeout. Even rested her head on my shoulder. The whole time, all I could think about was that note hidden in our garage. The woman beside me felt like a stranger. A stranger pretending to be my wife. The next week got worse. Much worse. My notes were starting to reveal patterns. She wasn't staying late at work randomly. It happened almost every Tuesday and Thursday. The same days. The same excuses. The same vague explanations. Another weird thing stood out. Whenever she claimed to be working late, she would stop responding to texts for hours. But the moment she came home, she'd suddenly answer everything at once. Like she'd only just seen my messages. One Thursday evening, I tested something. Around 7 p.m. I sent. Hope work isn't too stressful. No response. At 8 p.m. Want me to save dinner for you? No response. At 9 p.m. Everything okay? Still nothing. Then at 9:47 p.m., all three messages instantly showed as read. 30 seconds later she replied. Sorry. Crazy meeting. Convenient. Very convenient. The problem? A mutual friend unknowingly destroyed that story the next day. I ran into one of her coworkers while grabbing coffee. We chatted for a few minutes. Then he casually mentioned something. Must be nice having your wife home early these days. I froze. What do you mean? He looked confused. Management cancelled most overtime weeks ago. I felt my stomach drop. Weeks ago. Not yesterday. Not recently. Weeks. I somehow finished the conversation without making it obvious something was wrong. The second I got back to my car, I just sat there staring through the windshield. My hands were shaking. At that point I knew. Maybe not every detail. But enough. She was lying. Repeatedly. Deliberately. And she had been doing it for a long time. That night I confronted her again. Not about cheating. Just about the overtime. I wanted to see what she'd do. Predictably, she doubled down. Of course we're working overtime. Who told you otherwise? When I mentioned the coworker's name, she didn't even hesitate. Oh, he doesn't know what's happening in my department. Another lie. Instant. Effortless. Like breathing. The ease with which she lied scared me more than the actual lies. Because it meant she'd had practice. A lot of practice. The following Monday, something happened that pushed me over the edge. I received a call from our bank. Nothing alarming. Just routine fraud prevention verification. But during the conversation, the representative mentioned a charge I didn't recognize. A hotel. Across town. 3 separate visits over the previous month. I initially assumed there had been a mistake. Then I checked the dates. Every single charge matched one of her late work nights. Every single one. I remember gripping the phone so hard my hands started cramping. The representative asked if everything was okay. I told her yes. Hung up. And sat in complete silence. The evidence was piling up faster than I could process it. The note. The lies. The missing hours. The hotel charges. The secret phone calls. The fake overtime. Each piece by itself might have been explainable. Together? Not a chance. For the first time, I seriously considered hiring a private investigator. I never thought I'd be that guy. But I needed certainty. Not assumptions. Not theories. Proof. Absolute proof. As fate would have it, I wouldn't need to hire anyone. Because 48 hours later, my wife made a mistake so massive that she practically handed me the truth herself. And what I found wasn't just evidence of cheating. It revealed that the situation was far worse than I had imagined. 48 hours later, I got my proof. Not because I was clever. Not because I hacked anything. Because my wife got careless. It happened on a Wednesday night. She had fallen asleep on the couch while watching TV. Something she almost never did. Her phone was lying face down on the coffee table. I wasn't planning to touch it. Honestly, by that point I was exhausted. Emotionally drained. Part of me already knew what I was going to find. I just didn't want to see it. Then her phone lit up. A message notification appeared. For the first time in months, there was no passcode screen. She must have forgotten to lock it. I looked. I know some people will judge me for that. Maybe they're right. But after months of lies, gaslighting, and excuses, I looked. The message was from a contact saved under a woman's name. Claire. The text said, "Miss you already. Tonight was amazing, red heart." My chest immediately tightened. I opened the conversation. And everything fell apart. There were hundreds of messages. Hundreds. Photos. Voice notes. Plans. Hotel reservations. Inside jokes. Conversations stretching back almost 8 months. 8 months. I remember staring at the screen, unable to breathe properly. The worst part wasn't the flirting. It wasn't the explicit messages. It wasn't even the hotel bookings. It was how she talked about me. I became him. Never my name. Just him. Like I was some obstacle standing in the way of her happiness. One message burned itself into my memory. The guy asked if she felt guilty. Her response: "Not really. My marriage has been dead for years." I nearly dropped the phone. Dead for years? That was news to me. Apparently, while I was planning vacations, repairing our house, and trying to support her through difficult periods, she had already rewritten our entire marriage in her head. According to her version of reality, we were practically strangers. The messages got worse. Far worse. Because this wasn't some emotional affair that crossed boundaries. It was a full-blown relationship. They exchanged "I love you" regularly. They talked about a future together. Talked about living together. Talked about traveling together. And then I found something that completely blindsided me. The affair partner wasn't a coworker. Wasn't some random guy from the gym. Wasn't anyone I'd ever suspected. It was my friend. One of my closest friends. A guy I'd known for almost 12 years. A guy who had attended our wedding. A guy who had eaten dinner in our house dozens of times. A guy who had looked me in the eye and asked how I was doing while sleeping with my wife behind my back. I felt numb. Not angry. Not sad. Just numb. Like my brain couldn't process that level of betrayal. I kept scrolling. Mistake after mistake after mistake. And then another bomb dropped. The affair wasn't 8 months old. That was just when the messages started. Buried further back in the conversation were references to things that happened over a year earlier. Private jokes. Past trips. Shared memories. The relationship had likely been going on for at least 18 months. Maybe longer. I sat there until almost 3 in the morning reading everything. Every lie. Every excuse. Every betrayal. By sunrise, I knew more about my wife's secret life than I ever wanted to know. I also discovered something else. Something that terrified me. They weren't planning to end the affair. They were planning to leave me. Together. There were messages discussing finances. Housing. Timing. How to make the separation easier. How to avoid looking like bad people. One message actually said, "We just need him to accept it." Him. Me. Like I was some problem to manage. A task on a checklist. Not a husband. Not a person. Just collateral damage. Around 6 a.m., I heard movement upstairs. My wife was waking up. I quickly put her phone back exactly where I'd found it. Then I sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee. Waiting. She walked downstairs half asleep. Kissed me on the cheek. And asked how I slept. I looked directly at her. At the woman who had spent years lying to my face. The woman who had betrayed me with one of my closest friends. The woman who had spent months pretending everything was normal. And somehow, I managed to smile back. Because for the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew the truth. And I had absolutely no intention of showing my hand until I knew exactly what I was going to do next. What she didn't know was that the very same afternoon, another completely unexpected event would hand me even more information. Information that would turn this situation from devastating into something genuinely unbelievable. The next afternoon, I left work early. Not because I had some grand plan. Honestly, I could barely focus on anything. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten properly. My head felt like it was full of broken glass. Every few minutes, another message I'd read the night before would replay in my mind. The hotel reservations. The lies. The future they were planning together. The way they talked about me. I kept asking myself the same question. How long had they been laughing at me? Because that's what it felt like. Not just betrayal. Humiliation. The worst part was that I still had to act normal. When my wife texted me around noon asking if I wanted takeout for dinner, I replied with a thumbs up emoji like nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my car trying not to throw up. Around 2 p.m., I got a call from an unknown number. Normally I ignore those. For some reason, I answered. Is this Mark? Not my real name, obviously. Yes. The woman on the other end hesitated. Then she said something that instantly got my attention. I think you should know your wife is sleeping with my husband. I honestly thought it was a prank. Or a scam. Something. Anything. Because there was no way this situation could get worse. Apparently it could. The woman introduced herself. Let's call her Rachel. And the husband she was talking about? My friend. The affair partner. The same man from the messages. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then she started talking. Fast. Like she'd been holding everything in for months. She explained she'd suspected the affair for a long time. Her husband had become distant. Protective of his phone. Secretive. Emotionally unavailable. All the same patterns I'd been seeing. A week earlier, she'd finally found evidence. Screenshots. Messages. Photos. Enough to confirm everything. She had spent days trying to decide whether to contact me. Eventually she decided I deserved to know. The irony nearly made me laugh. I already knew. At least I thought I did. Then she said something that changed everything. This isn't the first time. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? She sighed. The kind of exhausted sigh someone makes when they've reached their breaking point. He cheated before. I felt my heartbeat quicken. When? Several times. Several times. Apparently my friend had a history. Multiple affairs. Multiple lies. Multiple betrayals. Rachel had stayed after previous incidents because he always promised to change. Promised to be honest. Promised to become a better husband. The usual script. This time was different. This time he was emotionally invested. This time he was talking about leaving. For my wife. The conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. By the end, we had exchanged evidence. Screenshots. Dates. Locations. Timelines. And that's when another disturbing realization emerged. My wife wasn't telling him the truth either. Just like she'd been lying to me. She'd been lying to him. Rachel had screenshots proving it. In messages to him, my wife claimed I was emotionally abusive. Controlling. Manipulative. That we hadn't been intimate in years. That I constantly screamed at her. None of it was true. Not even remotely. I couldn't believe what I was reading. She had created an entirely fictional version of our marriage. A version designed to justify what she was doing. A version where she was the victim. And I was the villain. According to her messages, I was practically a monster. Meanwhile, I'd spent months blaming myself for problems I didn't even create. Rachel wasn't the only person who'd been lied to. My wife had apparently been telling friends a similar story. Several mutual friends had heard pieces of it. Different details. Same theme. Unhappy marriage. Terrible husband. Trapped wife. I sat there stunned. Not because she cheated. I already knew that. What shocked me was how thoroughly she'd rewritten reality. She wasn't just hiding the affair. She was building a narrative. A safety net. Preparing people to support her when everything eventually came out. Then Rachel dropped one final bombshell. One that neither of us fully understood at the time. I think there's another guy. I blinked. What? She explained she'd seen references in messages that didn't match her husband. Different schedules. Different names. Different conversations. At first she assumed she was mistaken. Now she wasn't so sure. My wife might not just be cheating with my friend. There might be someone else too. I remember staring at the dashboard of my car. Completely speechless. I had gone from suspecting an affair to discovering an 18-month relationship, to learning my friend was involved, to finding out my wife had been lying about our marriage to everyone. And now there might be another man. At this point reality felt ridiculous. Like some terrible movie that kept adding plot twists. When I got home that evening, my wife greeted me with a smile. Asked how work was. Asked if I wanted dinner. Acted completely normal. I looked at her and wondered how many versions of herself existed. The wife I knew. The woman my friend knew. The victim she'd created for other people. And maybe whoever she became around this mysterious third person. What I didn't know was that within a few days, I'd finally discover whether the second man was real. And the answer would trigger the most explosive confrontation of my entire life. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what Rachel had told me. A second guy. At first it sounded impossible.